Hi, I'm Jodie Thornton, and today I want to talk to you about why our kids really tantrum. And I want to talk about a couple of the myths that I hear and put on very reputable sites about why kids tantrum. And I want to talk about why they're not correct and what really causes tantrums. And then what is our role as parents? Like, how do we help children when they're prone to tantrums? So the first thing people will say is because this is just how children handle being upset. And that is a crock. Like, children, children who are upset that don't tantrum, right? So it's not an absolute. And secondly, once a child knows how to handle their tantrum or has an adult that knows how to help them through a tantrum, they can be upset without tantruming. Like, that's just not an absolute. Certainly it's something that happens. It's not something that's necessarily unusual. But when we say things like, this is how children handle being upset, it kind of sounds like you just let that happen. And it's not the end of the world if you do choose to let it happen, but there's so many things you can do if you want to and you have the capacity to help them. The second one, again, it's a little bit in the absolute. So they'll say that this is how children try to get what they want. Like, this is how they escalate to make sure that you will give them what they need, right? And it's kind of half true. The half that is true is that if they feel that they need something and then they escalate, they have a tantrum, and then you give them that thing that they need, well then yes, the tantrum will stop most of the time, not always, but most of the time the tantrum will stop. And it's not that they're using the tantrum to get what they need, and they may even think that they are, but essentially what their bodies are doing is helping them to stay focused on what it is that they need, and they're trying to find a way. So most kids would not use it as an intentional strategy, but even those that do use it as an intentional strategy, it's not because they're saying, if I just make it so uncomfortable for my parent, then I'll get what they want. They're just like, I don't have a better way. I literally don't have a better way to get what I need. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I know that that can be a touchy thing. We're going to talk about what needs really mean and how do we address that without actually giving in to every whim that our children have. So then the third myth that I want to bust is that their social and emotional skills haven't developed yet. Now, again, with the half-truths, kind of. Yes, you can help a child. So a couple of things. One is you can help a child to develop their social and emotional skills. So it's not like if they're too young to have the social and emotional skills developed, therefore you just do nothing. That's just par for the course. That's not necessarily the case. So you can just let it pass. You can just wait until they grow out of them. Some kids won't grow out of them, but also you don't have to wait. Like, you can actually help them with their social and emotional skills now. And then secondly, if a child doesn't have social and emotional skills, we can actually support them through a tantrum. So it's not like, well, if they don't have the social and emotional skills, then they're just going to tantrum. We can actually step in and support them through that tantrum. They're not like, it's like an on-off switch and they're the only ones who have access. We can actually support them through it. The last one, which I just find these so funny. Like, I actually researched these before I did this recording, and I've struggled not to eye roll. But anyway, so it says that children can't cope with stressful situations like toy taking. Now, children can cope with amazing amounts of stress. Like, children are so resilient. But what we see as, well, the toy was taken, therefore I'm going to have a tantrum, we see that as they're not coping. But actually what's happening is something has upset them. They actually have a need. And then we say, well, they should just be able to accept that their needs are not going to get met. And that's the key. That's kind of the underpinning thread through all of these, is this idea that kids should be able to cope with not getting their needs met. And in some ways that can be kind of enticing. Like, if they weren't, getting the toast the way that they wanted, it might be more relaxing if they didn't tantrum about that. But do we really want to teach our kids not to get their needs met? Like, to just be okay with that? Like, I don't think we do. What we want is to help them to understand their emotions and to be able to be more skillful about getting their needs met. So I want to talk now about what then that what then really causes tensions, if it's not really all those things are kind of half truths, what is the real thing behind why our kids are tantruming? So when an emotion comes up for any of us, that emotion is a signal, it's a message to ourselves that we are either getting or not getting our needs met. So the ones that we call happy or good feelings or positive emotions, they're all the ones that tell us that something's happening that's working for us. When we have an emotion that we would call negative or uncomfortable or a bad feeling, those feelings are the ones that are telling us that we didn't get something, we're not getting something that we need. And so then when we have those feelings coming up, what's meant to happen is we're meant to have the feeling come up, we're meant to do something with that signal, and then the feeling will dissipate. So if we have a feeling that's coming up, like I'm so happy, when we notice that feeling, acknowledge it, perhaps even recognize, like, how could we keep this going, or how could we have this feeling again, or just acknowledging, why is this so wonderful for me, then that feeling dissipates. Now, if the experience continues, you keep having the feeling, and that's great. But on the other side, when the feeling comes up to tell us, I'm really sad because my brother doesn't want to play with me, that feeling is meant to give us a signal of something to do. So one option is to work out a way for our brother to want to play with us. One option is to look at underneath that. Why is it that I want my brother to play with me? Is it because I'm just bored and I feel like he's the best option? Well, I do have other options to have fun, right? But we're just using that feeling to get in under the need. Now, if you don't do anything with that feeling, if the feeling comes up and you just let it sit, then it will do one of two things. One is, if it's a really important one, it'll start to intensify. Just because you've not done anything about it, it's just going to intensify of its own accord. The other thing that can happen is that one feeling that didn't get addressed, it sits there. And then the next thing comes up and it sits there. And the next thing comes up and it doesn't get addressed and it sits there. And it's not so long before they get into overwhelm. And that overwhelm is what the tantrum is. So overwhelm can look like tantruming. It can look like withdrawing. So if we look at fight or flight, tantrum is kind of like a release or expression kind of way. But flight can happen too, where they actually withdraw into themselves or they walk away into another room. And it can look like a bunch of other things. Like overwhelm can also look like suppressing my own feelings and then focusing on other people just to do what I'm supposed to do to withdraw from the discomfort of the fact that I'm in overwhelm. The overwhelm can look like a bunch of different things, but tantruming is what we're kind of focusing on today. So if we think about that idea that either the feeling is intensifying and or they're stacking up, essentially what we've got is a window of how much emotion our children can take before they end up in overwhelm. Now that window will shorten if we are tired, and it shortens if we are sick, and it shortens if we are hungry or thirsty. And that's because our system is basically telling us you have a basic need that's up, right? And so in those cases, our job is not to worry about the tantrum, but to address that need. So what we want to do is expand that window by addressing the need. So we can notice things like, if the kids are hungry, we're going to get them fed. Now, if we can create awareness in our kids, that helps, so that they notice, when I start to get really upset about the colouring pencils, tends to be because I've missed my snack and I need something to eat so that I can actually enjoy colouring, even though I don't have the colours that I wanted, or even though the pencil is breaking, or whatever is happening for them. If they know that this is what happens for me when I start to get tired or hungry, then what we start to see is that they start to recognise, I need to eat, or I need to sleep, whatever that is. So you can build their awareness over time, but basically you want to just get that need met as quickly as you can. And that'll extend the window. So then if you've got that happening, so you've got them well fed, they're well rested, they've had enough to drink, they're not unwell, you're in that space, then the next step is actually to look at, what are the things that we need to do when that emotion comes up to address it so it can dissipate. So when we notice those feelings come up, We know that it's a signal about their needs. So if they're having those negative feelings, we know that there's something that they're not getting. And we want to identify what are those needs. Your key for needs is that they're always valid. So if you find yourself saying, well, you just need to have everything your own way, that's not a need, right? And you can tell, I even eye rolled while saying it, like you can tell because the tone is that it's something that you shouldn't want, right? It's something that I can't validate. So if we go deeper and go, well, you just want things your own way, perhaps it's a need for control. Perhaps it's a need to matter, that actually what their suggestions are actually something that's worthwhile trying out or even just choosing because they've suggested it. Whatever that need is, we need to go deeper. Anytime you find yourself not able to validate, you need to go deeper and find out what is that underlying super valid need, and just bring that to light. Like even just helping your kids see that they're not badly behaved, but they actually have a need, that can just be so reassuring and validating for them. So then we often get stuck in, if the need is valid, so perhaps it's the need to matter, and that means that they're wanting time with you because they've got the other siblings are taking up so much time and they need to matter, so they want you to play. And then we get stuck in, well, if the need is valid, I have to give them the thing they're asking for. And that is a trap. It's not true. There are a million more ways of getting that need met. This is just one way. And it might be that your child's preferred way, or it might be that they haven't thought of any other way. So the more we validate that need and then look for what are solutions that can work for everybody that's involved, the more we start to get more flexible about what happens, and the less those tantrums happen, because all of a sudden our kids can actually look for alternative solutions. I say all of a sudden. Sometimes it can be a quick process. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to learn, but once you hit the tipping point, all of a sudden the tantrums kind of dissipate because they start to focus on problem solving rather than on how overwhelmed I am and how this is just never going to change for me. They refocus on how do I solve this problem that I have. So in reality, we can't always find a way to meet the need in that moment. So some of the time we literally don't have enough time. So this is really typical for needing to get out the door in the morning or even going to bed at night. Like the longer you spend in problem solving at night time, the more tired your child will get, and the more frustrated you get, the less capable you are at problem solving. So sometimes we just don't have the time. Sometimes we haven't had enough practice at finding solutions. So by practice, there's kind of two parts. One is actually the skills of identifying, like, what are the things that would actually meet this need that we could do, not the ones we can't do, but the ones that we actually could do right now. The more you practice that, the more you can see the opportunities. And then the second thing is sometimes our own baggage gets in the way, and we have a lot more baggage than our kids do, but baggage nonetheless, either our or our kids' baggage gets in the way of us looking for those solutions, or we think that we might think of a solution but think we can't possibly do that, when really it's a baggage reason as to why we can't actually just choose that option. So we want to notice, the more practice we get at finding the solution, and the more we can open that window up by dealing with our baggage. So that might mean noticing the baggage or clearing the baggage, either way works. We can actually find ourselves better able to find those options. And sometimes our kids just don't have enough trust in the process to try out an option that really would work. And you see this for things like when our kids are getting really scared to learn how to swim. They don't trust that it's going to be enjoyable, so they don't try it, then they don't get the positive experience. So it kind of goes in a cycle, right? So what we need to do there is just keep practicing, right? So all of these times where we actually can't get the need met, traditional parenting approaches would have you say that you need to educate your child that they can't always get their need met. I don't recommend that. The second, and not to say you can always get your need met, but I just think when we start to say, if you can't get it met, you need to dissociate yourself from that need, then we start to pull ourselves away from what we want. We start to numb ourselves from what we want, and I don't recommend that as an option for our kids. the more modern approaches, maybe not more modern, but some of the more gentle and respectful approaches will just say, you know, you just need to allow them to feel bad about the fact that they're not getting what they need. Again, I don't recommend it. It is helpful to be allowed to have the feelings rather than be told you can't have the feelings. But the next step up is actually to validate and sit with your child, acknowledge the needs, make them feel like what they need is important, what they need matters, and if you could do something about it, you absolutely would. That process of sitting with your child in the big feelings that you cannot solve, that means that often the tantrums will, the more you do it, the less often the tantrums will happen, even when you can't meet the need. And when they do happen, the shorter they will be. And what we're underneath all of this, what we're saying is that it's not just okay that you feel like this. It's more so that what you need matters, that I am here with you. I would do something about it if I could. And really holding that space and being with your child in the feelings is a whole world apart from it's okay that you're sad. Like, I actually get quite anxious now when I see those posts on Facebook about people saying just tell your child that it's okay that they're upset. I don't know if it's just me, but I hear that as like it's not a big deal if you don't get what you need. And like, I don't like that message. I don't like it for myself, and I don't like it for anybody's children. I feel like what we need to be saying is what you need does matter, and we together will get more and more skillful at getting you what you need. We will work through this. We will work it out. And just because we can't do it right now doesn't mean we won't be able to do it next time. And that, it just feels so much nicer than, oh, it's okay that you're sad, sweetie. And like, I know I'm even saying it with a bit of a tone, and I know I can hear that like discomfort in myself with the message. And I know that it can be reassuring to hear it's okay to be sad. But in my view, it's okay to be sad is only really useful when our children are feeling upset at themselves for being sad. So when they're feeling shame about the sadness, then I think it's helpful to say it's okay to be sad because you're validating their experience. But when they're upset and we say it's okay to be sad, for me, most of the time that comes off as what you need is no big deal. And I don't think that's a message that we want to be giving our kids. So, all in all, what our role as parents is for kids who are having trouble with tantrums, our first role is to make sure that they are fed and rested. Like, this is something that kids, especially younger kids, they find it harder to notice, and they find it harder to make the decisions that they need to be able to make sure that they get the rest and the food that they need. Secondly, we need to be holding space for our kids so that they can feel safe enough to look at those feelings, to understand the messages they're getting, and really like have practice at identifying what are those underlying needs. What is the valid reason that you're upset? Our third one is to help them to build the skills to identify the options they have to get what they need, and to look at like what are the off limits areas that we're not seeing, either us or them not seeing because of our baggage or because of cultural limitations. We want to really open those options right up so that our children can actually get what they need more often. And then lastly is to help them feel heard and valid and valued when their needs can't be met. So in my next free webinar, is called Helping Little Children Handle Big Feelings. I'm going to be really drilling in on that second step, which is helping us to hold space for our children in a way that they can feel safe enough to look at those feelings and to understand them. And we're going to be both helping you to identify what those feelings are and what they're telling us about our kids' needs, and also helping our children to start to recognize that in themselves as well. If you'd like some help or you'd like to participate in that webinar, you can register at jodithornton.com/feelings, and I'll put the link of that in the description of this video. And the last thing I wanted to say is I've covered a huge ground here. Like, we started with busting a couple of myths. I've gone through how does a tantrum actually happen, and then what we need to do. That It's very, very high level summary of all of these concepts. And so I expect that you have some questions. So please pop them in the comments of this video and I'll come back. If I can answer them in text, I will. And if not, I'll record another blog or perhaps even a Facebook Live just to answer your questions. So please pop them in the comments box. And thank you so much for having me as part of your village.